Hello to all that are watching. My name is Mitch Hansen. The name of this presentation is What Statistics Correlate with Winning MLB Playoff Series. You'll please have to forgive my voice. I was at the Michigan football game this past weekend and was screaming the whole time, but hopefully you will be able to understand me well enough. Okay. I want to take you through some of the inspiration on why I chose this topic. There is a widely accepted and demonstrated belief that the MLB playoffs are largely random. And this is something that has been echoed in numerous works of scholarly literature and baseball research. You can read this quote from Fangraphs on the slide, essentially saying that the sabermetric community would believe that winning in the playoffs is all luck. And you can see some of these basic statistics down here and how there's not a strong correlation with any of them. And those are just a few I picked from the Fangraphs article. But pretty much every variable that they used did not demonstrate a strong correlation for any of them. And this has been echoed, like I said, in academic literature. You can look at, there's a California Berkeley study from 2015 that looked at, are teams that are hot late in the year, do they do better in the playoffs? No, was the answer. They looked at winning percentage against top teams. Well, kind of, but not really enough to draw a conclusion. And we see those sorts of conclusions drawn in most of the studies that cover this subject. This is something that's been in the recent baseball zeitgeist. A lot of talk about the Braves and the Dodgers, getting eliminated early in the playoffs. This is something that's been a trend over recent times. The Dodgers winning the division so many years in a row and falling up short in the playoffs. So it's an issue that matters now, and it's an issue that has people questioning the value of the regular season, really, because if you can just go into the playoffs and get lucky, what's the point of playing 162 games? So it's something that baseball really needs to take a look at. So in reading the previous articles about what it takes to win in the MLB playoffs, I did have some things that left me unsatisfied about them. One of those things is the statistics they used as variables. Many of them are now seen as basic or outdated or often misleading. In the case of ERA, obviously that's a lot. Defense has a lot to do with it. Defense has a lot to do with batting average, ballpark factors, and things like that. They use strictly on-field statistics, so there wasn't any mention of, record in one-run games, which we'll get to. Salary, that sort of thing. It was strictly production-based and pretty those metrics were pretty rudimentary in the context of modern sabermetrics. Final problem I had was in measuring playoff success, a lot of times it was inconsistent. Sometimes they would use winning percentage, but that doesn't always tell the story of playoff success. You can win every series in 7 games and not have a great percentage necessarily, but you can be World Series champions. And same thing goes for total playoff wins. If you win 3 games in a series and still lose, well, who cares? You still lost. So what can we do to improve on those studies? Um, it's 2023, getting up, with some more modern sabermetrics such as WAR, OPS plus, and ERA plus. These metrics are more helpful for evaluating really how good players are, because WAR factors in a player's defense and the position they play. And then OPS plus and ERA plus are weighted not only for um, ballpark factors, but also it takes into account the league as a whole. So the average OPS plus and ERA plus will always be 100. So if you have 100 OPS plus, you're about an average hitter. If you have 100 ERA plus, you're about an average pitcher. We can talk about roster-specific questions, such as how many all-star caliber players do they have, or how dominant is their bullpen. And finally, we can use, from Sabres' official website, a standardized value system for measuring playoff success. They use this to keep track throughout history of which organizations have been the most successful. We will be using this to calculate a team's playoff score, see how successful they were for a given playoff run. You can see that the World Series winner gets 100, the World Series loser gets 50, the League Championship Series loser gets 25, and the League Division Series loser gets 12.5. And I think that makes sense, just practically speaking. Each series win is worth double than the rest. So when we want to figure out what correlates best to winning playoff series, I wanted to look at 3 categories of measurement, and these were just 3 that were particularly interesting to me. The first category is production, and for that we're going to be using OWAR, which is WAR for a batter's offensive output at the plate, defensive WAR, which is the same thing but for defensive production, the sum of those 2 WARs to find their total batter's production, the staff's total pitching WAR, OPS plus, and ERA plus. If you're watching this, WAR is wins above replacement. And if you're watching this and you don't know what it is, it's a very common statistic. And as we'll get to, players at an MVP level, according to Baseball Reference, are considered to have at least 8 WAR in a season. Players at an all-star level are considered to have 5+ WAR, and players at a starter caliber are considered to have 2+ WAR. So this is kind of a standardized system for measuring the value of a player. Then we have OPS plus and ERA plus, which we talked about. The plus statistics account for ballpark and league average. We talked about that. Okay, down to the second category of what we're going to be measuring here. The number of players who performed at an MVP level, the number of players at an all-star level, and the number of players who were starter caliber to measure the depth, the highs of the team, how many superstars do they have. Then we're going to be looking at the ERA plus of the team's 3 most used relievers, because that kind of measures the dominance of the back end of the bullpen. That's oftentimes in a 7-game series, you'll really, if it's a good team, you'll really only see the back 3 of the bullpen, and I think that's just the most interesting to look at for implications on playoff success. ERA plus of the 4 most used starters, so a typical playoff rotation is 4, which is why we're using that number. And the OPS plus of the 4 strongest hitters. So we're basically looking at the core of the lineup. How strong is that core of the lineup? And then finally, we're going to be looking at age and win percentage in 1-run games to see if that has any impact on winning these playoff series. You can explain the data and the process. Here's a little screenshot of my Excel workbook. I compiled data from Baseball Reference, pasted them in Excel. I computed their playoff score using Sabres standardized value system, and then that was the dependent variable. And then the aforementioned categories of statistics are independent variables. So after we run that multivariable regression, we're going to look for any significant results and strong correlations. A few notes: we're tracking teams from 95 to 23. That's when the playoffs expanded. No wild card games. The sample sizes are small enough as it is, and 1 card sample size in baseball is not going to be enough. No COVID year. It was just a weird playoff format, weird sample size. And most importantly, it's important to stress I'm not expecting any significant results. I'm expecting that they are random, according to the previous findings of the sabermetric community. This is more of a this is more to see which factors can nudge a team in a certain direction rather than be an end all be all predictor of playoff success. So right here we can look at the results of the regression, and I will be looking at the p-values to determine the strongest relationships for the model. As you can see, we have none that are truly statistically significant at an alpha level of 0.05 or 0.1, which confirms the randomness expectation I had. But there are some interesting results and some variables that do show some impact. The number one, and we'll get to this in a minute, probably most interesting, is the one-run game win percentage. Number two is total pitching WAR. Number three is heart of the order OPS plus, and number four is all-stars. And you can see the variables with the least amount of impact there. Pretty interesting. So when we look at those broader takeaways, as we said, there's no magic formula for playoff success. It is random. We saw that pitching WAR was a more reliable predictor than ERA plus. And I think that because pitching WAR is a cumulative stat, it better reflects depth rather than ERA plus. And that being a cumulative stat reflecting durability as well. ERA plus does not reflect a team's depth or durability as much as WAR would because it is cumulative over the entire season rather than weighted. The number of the MVPs and starters was largely irrelevant, but perhaps the all-stars matter a little bit. I think this, maybe speaks to depth a bit as well. If you have a strong core of star players, that may be more important than having an MVP caliber player or a lot of guys who are solid. I think, and most interestingly, is this one-run game win percentage. It was by far the most correlated with winning in the postseason, and perhaps that suggests that winning run games is skill-based. It's not luck and it's not random. And then perhaps that also suggests a carryover to the postseason. If you're good at winning run games in the regular season, you'll be good at winning run games in the postseason. For next time, some things I'd like to investigate is the source of one-run games is succeeding in one-run games. Does that have to do with bullpen? Does it have to do with base running defense? What is it? Another thing I'd like to look at is payroll metrics and how that impacted team success in the playoffs. Clutch statistics, same thing. How did hitters hit in clutch situations? How did relievers relieve in high leverage clutch situations? And then looking at WAR and salary allocation by position. Do teams have more success with really great catchers and really great second basemen? Is there a significant impact, from a positional standpoint? So with a little more data, I'd like to look at that next time, but hopefully this was pretty interesting and you learned something. Thank you.